I'm here live in Juliet's house in Verona. What better place to explore Chinese Cinderella for Edexcel IGCSE English Language? We're on Q5. I'm going to get you the full 22 marks. Stay tuned. This is Schofield on
abbiamo il cuore a strisce, portaci dove vuoi.
You know the mark scheme by now. You give detailed comparative insight into both texts, include occasional language analysis, and show that you have compared and grasped the key ideas and perspectives across the text as a whole. But as ever, there's more than one way to tackle this longer question. My current advice? Well, include an introduction in which you sum up the two texts in relation to the question and include an initial similarity or difference. Beyond the introduction, you should write 4 main paragraphs, with each paragraph starting with a comparative statement, such as both texts or a key difference between the texts is. And of course, you're using quotations consistently to back up your points with some brief analysis. Soften can help you work more quickly and reduce thinking time when it comes to comparisons. I have talked about the soften approach within other recent videos. Reread the principles on screen now if you would like a refresher. It's pause time. Time for the text and the question. Compare how the writers present their ideas and perspectives about their childhood experiences. Support your answers with detailed examples from both texts, including brief quotations. The texts are about to appear on screen now, though email me at schofield@shakespeare@gmail.com if you would like a PDF version of this paper. Time now for you to have a go at jotting down some ideas within this delicious softened grid. Sketch it out. No need to use quotations at this point, but what are the key ideas in relation to the two texts' setting, opinions, feelings, tone, experiences, and narrative arc? Press pause now to get cracking. Here's the meat. Your turn to write a full question 5. Remember, topic sentences at the beginning of each main paragraph, which state a clear similarity or difference. You then explore this similarity or difference in more detail within each text, using quotations and analysing, remembering to compare. You also need that introduction, in which you summarise each text in relation to the question and introduce an initial comparative point. So go on, write that fabulous essay. The text will appear now at 3-second intervals. Press pause. Both texts are childhood accounts of unexpected encounters with parents. In text 1, the writer is surprised as a 6-year-old when she meets her parents for the first time and is informed that she will now be living with them. In text 2, the writer is surprised to be called home unexpectedly from boarding school, only to learn that she has won a prestigious writing competition. Both texts show children uncomfortable in the presence of their parents, although text 2 ends with a significant improvement in the relationship between father and daughter. In both texts, the children seem reasonably comfortable in their initial surroundings, although perhaps Adelaide in text 2 is more so than her counterpart in text 1. In text 1, the writer is sitting in the dark auditorium watching a new opera. Whilst this sounds a little solitary, given that no other children are mentioned as watching it with her, it does seem like a relaxing, stimulating way to spend an afternoon. Whereas the writer of text 1 may be on her own at the beginning of the text, Adelaide in text 2 is in a group at school where 4 of us were playing Monopoly. This is generally a fun, albeit exasperating, game, although we learn that the writer's heart was not in it. However, this is not because she isn't comfortable at school, but more because the thought of leaving school throbbed at the back of her mind like a persistent toothache. This simile suggests that Adelaide feels a slow, nagging pain at the idea of going home, a place where she feels awkward and out of place. Indeed, in both texts, the writers feel uncomfortable at the thought of going to their parents. In text 1, the writer has been brought up by her grandparents and doesn't even know what her parents look like. When she meets them, her mother bore a stern expression, whilst her father stared at her like she was some curious animal. Both quotations seem to imply a lack of familiarity and affection, with the latter simile suggesting a strange kind of dispassionate analysis on the part of the father of his own daughter. In contrast, Adelaide in text 2 does know her parents, but she is deliberately excluded from much of their lives at home. Hence, she doesn't even realise that they have moved house and hasn't ever been into her father's study, the Holy of Holies. This alliterative metaphor suggests that her daughter sees this room, and by extension her father, as something to be revered, partly because she knows so little about it and him. The writer in text 1 also knows very little about her parents. However, unlike Adelaide in text 2, she is more prepared to be dismissive. For instance, she references her mother's rough peasant manner. These adjectives suggest that she feels no natural affinity with her mother, and indeed is inclined to look down upon her mannerisms and accents. In contrast, in text 2, Adelaide remains respectful to her parent, although she is suspicious about his smile and asks herself, "Is this a giant ruse on his part to trick me?" This rhetorical question confirms her uncertainty around her parents, something the writer of text 1 certainly feels, although this is largely because she has never met them. After being taken to their parents, the two children feel very different emotions. In text 1, the writer feels confused and upset at the idea that she must leave her grandparents' house in Shitang so quickly in order to join her parents in Wenling. She asks questions in distress and feels that her mother with the strange accent was a bit scary. Clearly, this sudden change has caused significant emotional upheaval, something which is accentuated by her failure to develop a warm connection with her mother, who seems frightening rather than loving. In contrast, in text 2, the writer is delighted at the news she receives from her father, winning an international writing competition. She asks herself, "Is it possible? Am I dreaming? Me, the winner?" The rhetorical question shows her disbelief, whilst the very short utterances imply that she is almost lost for words at having achieved such a feat. Adelaide then takes advantage of this award to bravely ask her father whether she might be able to go to university in England, the thought of which she describes as like entering heaven. Thus, the summoning to her father has resulted in the potential for idyllic joy, a sharp contrast to the writer in text 1, who becomes seized by such an indescribable fear and sadness as she leaves Shatang that she bursts into tears. However, this is not because she's been incredibly happy with her grandparents, but it is because she has been dragged from the only life she had ever known. The verb dragged is revealing and shows her unwillingness at embarking upon this new stage in her life. Thus, a key difference between the texts is that Adelaine's relationship with her parent develops over the course of the text, whereas the writer of text 1 remains scared and alienated. You might expect a 6-year-old child to be incredibly excited after meeting her parents, but this is not the case, and instead the text ends with her on a bus which is moving like a coffin. The morbid imagery reflects the writer's own depressed, trapped state. She has had no choice or notice about returning to live with her parents, and she is left feeling disheartened and entombed. In contrast, Adelaine's father remains relatively aloof, but he does laugh approvingly and looked radiant. Whilst he only permits Adelaine to go to university in England on the basis that she goes to medical school, there remains clear evidence of pride in his daughter and new belief in her intellectual capabilities. So why does this get full marks? Let's analyse a little. Remember to give a brief general overview of both texts in the introduction and include an initial comparison. Some of my pupils are still not doing this. Why not, guys? Aim for nuanced phrasing when making comparisons. I do this within my opening sentence, in which I point out that the children seem reasonably comfortable in their initial surroundings, but perhaps Adelaine seems more so than her counterparts. So aim for nuanced arguments. Just because Adelaine's heart isn't in the game of Monopoly doesn't mean she's unhappy at school. No, she's worried about the thought of leaving school and what her life will be like then. At times, synthesize quotations. Bring them in from different parts of the text to give sharp insight into the text as a whole and to back up the points you're making. In general, the shorter the quotations, the better. Use subject terminology regularly, although not to the same extent as required in question 4, you'll be doubtless relieved to hear. On this particular segment of the essay, note alliterative metaphor, adjectives, rhetorical question. Hurrah! Aim to develop your argument and make more detailed, sophisticated, comparative points about the text. This is something I do mid-paragraph here, when I point out that the alarm caused by the sudden command to live with her parents in a different city in text 1 is accentuated by the alarming initial lack of affection from both parents, but especially the mother. Remember to compare at the beginning of sentences and halfway through as well. Note the technique of putting a dash mid-sentence and starting the subsequent phrase with a sharp contrast to. Even in the final paragraph, introduce some different interesting quotations to produce further detailed comparative insight into the text. No need to waste time on a limp conclusion.
This has been the Schofield on Shakespeare production, helping you get full 22 marks for Q5 Chinese Cinderella for Edexcel IGCSE English Language. Many thanks for watching.